Good morning. Welcome to Sales Chatter, the only podcast that's out here with the mission of getting 10,000 reps to hit a million GP. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohammed. With me is my main man, the president and CEO of RGTX Logistics Solutions, Jeff Dickinson. Good morning, brother. So happy to see you. And, we have the market analyst at DAT Freight and Analytics, Dean Croke, always joining with us on Wednesday. So happy to have you with us this morning, guys. Good morning. How are you both doing this morning?
Yeah, great. Good to be with you guys. Always look forward to Wednesdays.
Oh,
I always seem to learn something.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Dean, thank you so much. Sorry, I understand you got in late last night and to be able to jump on at 7 o'clock in the morning over there in Phoenix, right?
Yeah, I just did an Instagram post. I have a few Instagram followers, and they always love, the travels and the stuff that goes on. So I'm laying in bed at 5:30 a.m. and I hear this beep, 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 bang, crash. And then I hear more beeping. I thought, the trash guys are here. So I can't resist going out talking to some of the drivers. So there was a guy from Republic Services, then there was a guy from Shamrock Foods. And at the back of the hotel, there's this really narrow alleyway that you got to spot these 28-foot pup trailers onto a loading dock to unload food. But it was there was so much activity in our back street. And I was just thinking that a lot of people in the hotel would be really annoyed by all the noise. But I'm like, there's my wake-up call. That's the sound. That's the music of my people. I'm out there.
Music of my people. Speaking of music of my people, let's get into our intro.
Let's go.
Yeah.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
I'll say good morning, Daman. So happy to see you. If anybody was able to catch yesterday's DAT IQ live show, Daman was a guest on there with Dean, and it was amazing. It was honestly great to hear about the different marketing conditions and how things change in BC and driving in British Columbia. One thing I definitely did enjoy, Dean, was when Daman was saying that they still use the chains for the tires. Still, they're keeping it old school, So that's awesome to kind of see. So definitely go check that. Keep it old school.
Real men still use steel chains.
At least they're not using studded snow tires.
Wow,
That's old school.
What are the socks they put over the tire? I don't get it. Like, so if you're watching Highway Through Hell and you've got like Al Quiring coming out to tell you up the smasher, you'll guarantee it's like someone that's put something that's not a steel chain on, or none at all.
I'll tell you one thing. One of the best shows I love watching is Ice Trucker. The Ice Truckers.
Right.
Ice truckers or whatever, and they go over the lake. It's just amazing. I'm like, my job's easy.
It goes back to the 50s, right? It goes back to the 50s. They have to wait till the ice is a certain thickness and they can't travel above a certain speed. Otherwise, the bow wave out front comes back off the portage, the land.
Or something like that, man.
I think it's on like Discovery or something like that. I know I catch, what is it? Shipping Wars, the one where they use UShip, the website, and it's like random people going with like their hot shots and they try to load up like all these like random like artifacts and things like that and get paid. It's really good. It's a really good insight and it actually opened up my eyes to UShip. I never heard about a UShip before, so it's great that we're actually getting.
It's on a bucket list. It's on my bucket list, but my wife says that'll never happen in my lifetime. So it's like,
I wonder why. Maybe this risk has something to do with it.
She doesn't like risk at all. Whereas I'm on the other side of the spectrum. If the plane's not bouncing around with turbulence, it's not fun.
Right. You look at that risk reward kind of scenario, right?
Well, you look at it too, because I think Dean's wife, she has like a catering business, I believe, right? So it's like you look at that compared to, hey, do I want to go on turbulence on the plane?
Oh, I understand that.
She's food safe, and like if it hasn't fallen out of the plane before in 63 years, I got a good chance of surviving. So let's have it.
That's how I did. And as Dean mentioned, that he made a post on Instagram. For people who don't know, the Grumpy Pete is his handle. It's a great follow. I definitely follow it all the time and get some pretty cool things. So I'll definitely be checking out the post. So boys,
just real quick, Dean, fill us in. Grumpy Pete, is that because you're a grumpy old man driving a Peterbilt?
So that's the myth. Well, a lot of people call me Grumpy or Pete, which is hysterical because I'm neither.
I can't see that.
Me either.
I can't see that.
When I put my big 18-inch drop visor on my Peterbilt and the old school single headlights, my 10 and 12-year-old boys said, "Dad, it's a grumpy looking Peterbilt." And at the time, and I still have this long-term dream to write children's books called The Adventures of the Grumpy Pete. So the truck actually has Grumpy from the Seven Dwarfs on the hood, and when you go to like Touch a Truck events and shows where there's kids for fundraising events or charity, kids love the idea that the truck has a name. So that's part of the reason the truck's got a name. But then I stumbled upon drivers wanting to have videos of themselves while they're working because people can only take pictures of themselves, their truck, but they can never take a video. And that's the niche that I found for social media. So I joke that I'm in charge of pumping up everyone's tires because my social media pages are always about everyone else, not about me, but all about the good things that truckers do and try to promote the industry.
Right. That's a good story. I like it.
Yeah,
it's a great follow, and I didn't know that about like the Seven Dwarfs, Grumpy being one, and you're so right because we've got the auto show coming here in Toronto, and it's not like trucks, but it's like all the new cars. It's a big thing for 2 weeks, and they have like Cars, the Disney, the Pixar movie, and they have a booth every time, and that one always has the longest line. Like if you want to take pictures with Chase or even from Paw Patrol. But boys, let's get into it. I caught yesterday's episode. I do want to talk. Is there? I know in Toronto, and I think maybe Jeff as well on the East Coast, we're getting some big snow. Like we're getting some hectic snow. They're telling people to stay home today and not risk that. Has anything been in terms of like the freight market conditions, Dean? I can touch on.
Not yet. It takes a lot of weather to move the needle, but I suspect Winter Storm Cassandra, which is coming all the way from the Gulf, that'll end up through northern Maine tomorrow, will do some damage. Right? You had a lot of tornadoes through Georgia yesterday, so I think it'll slow things down. The thing with unless you've got a road closure, and there are some road closures out on the 80, as there has been for the last few weeks, unless you start to shut down major arteries like we did in the polar vortex on I-40, unless you shut down a major artery, then you start to see the impact on freight. So what will move the needle, though, next week will be the UP has shut down their freight network, container freight network from LA to the Midwest because of, I think it's a bridge closure. Is it a bridge closure, Jeff?
Yeah, something like that. I just read that, but also you have that huge storm that's impacting Kansas, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and anywhere between 5 to 9 inches. I already read they already have about 1,000 plows out there taking care of the route. So
that'll move the needle, Ryan. To answer your question, when you have the double whammy of a bridge outage on a major Class 1 railroad, and you've got weather like that in big freight markets, you'll start to see an impact. A lot of the weather in the Midwest are in freight markets that aren't huge in the spot market sense, but they're important arterials in terms of connecting major freight markets. So I think what we'll see this week with the UP metering or closing down their network, we'll see that Los Angeles to Chicago long haul / intermodal truckload lanes start to pop. We will see things slow down in the Northeast in particular. We've had a week of snow up there. We'll probably have 10 inches by the end of the week. That'll slow things down. But to Jeff's point about 1,000 plows, I think that's what you said. But in New England, we are incredibly adept at clearing snow. So we have equipment like you wouldn't believe. But when it hits somewhere like Atlanta, then it's a really big deal because it doesn't take much snow to slow down a network where they're not used to snow. So when everyone sort of, panics and says, "Oh my God, you're getting 18 inches of snow in New England," like it's kind of like an eye roll. Like that's just Tuesday. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah, if you live in New England, you can drive anywhere during the wintertime. I mean, even in South Carolina, North Carolina, they get like a quarter inch. It stops all traffic because they have no plows.
That's like Toronto. That's Toronto. Yeah,
it's just freaking all over the place. It's nasty.
Hey, so you guys caught the show yesterday. You were talking about that, Ryan. What a great guest, Daman.
Yeah, Damon's awesome. I was actually gonna text him and be like, "Hey, come on this morning," because like Damon, he has that, and I know he's watching. Obviously, he's watching things like that. He has that ability to be clear, and I like his messaging a lot, and speaking with like people on his team and things like that. And it's something that he mentioned yesterday about team service, which really opened up my eyes because I never thought about it for his thing because they do a lot of highway miles, right? And one thing he mentioned is that they're in the States more than they are in Canada. So to find two drivers who actually like each other and then want to spend
right,
time together
right.
doing shipments. It's a challenge, and it's something that I would never think about
Yeah,
because we look
yeah,
at team service. Jeff, maybe you could attest to this. Like in the automotive industry, you'll run some teams, refrigerated, you run some teams. So to find that congruency as well, and to know that balance, other than hey, I'm just going to hire 2 people and put them in the truck and hope that it
yeah.
works, right? So Jeff, you can attest to that as well.
Oh, definitely all the way. And you know, it's highly critical in this time of year when you've got the act of God and weather-related incidents coming across the Midwest or whatever, and then you have a line down at a auto manufacturer. That's kind of the worst scenario ever. It's like you really have to be creative and trying, because you gotta get that stuff there. There is no excuses at all. You know, that's where the stress comes from.
So
you know?
I did team driving once in my life in Australia, and I caught the bus home. So I like, you know, people drive trucks because they like their own company and don't mind the solitude and the windscreen time. You know, I'm a hardwired introvert by nature, so I don't mind being on my own. That's why I drove millions of miles in Australia on my own. I'm quite used to my own company, although I used to get annoyed with myself on probably more than one occasion. But the team thing is so hard because a truck is a small space.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize when you do this, the movement. You ever done a long trip and you come home and you feel like you're still moving, even though you're stationary? When you drive a team truck, it is relentless. The noise, the vibration, the bouncing around. It's hard to sleep in the bunk because you're always getting backslapped by the trailer as it goes across bumps. But the problem that teams have got is that, and I have some experience with biocompatible scheduling where you pair teams based on sleep profile. Now, I didn't get into this with Daman yesterday, but I wanted to. But when you arbitrarily pair 2 people that haven't got a biological relationship, you're already setting yourself up for a problem, because a lot of the selections are based on home zip, domicile address, smoking preferences, music, things like that, where that is sort of the middle. That's where you've got to get to. That's sort of table stakes. But the problem becomes when you've got 2 sleep types of the same sleep personality in the cab at the same time. So you've got 2 morning larks, or you've got 2 night owls. So the problem is that if you've got 2 night owls in the cab that want to sleep from 2 till 10 every day and drive until 2 or 3, you have one driver that's always driving against their body clock. And eventually you have some risky events, because it leads to the other reason team drivers have problems is trust. It's very hard to trust the other driver for being wide awake. So, because you're always you hear that analogy of I'm sleeping with one eye open because I'm worried if the guy's going to fall asleep. So what I did at a big truckload carrier is we did biocompatible scheduling where we understood the sleep personality of the drivers and we matched a morning lark with a night owl. So you put opposite sleep types in the cab at the same time, and then you have a better balance of risks throughout the day. So what we found from studies also in the data is wherever there's a biological relationship, you have really good outcomes from a risk perspective. So father, son, brother, sister, husband, wife, they would be your ideal preference. What's Daman say? The key is to keep the truck moving so there's always sleeping and one is awake. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough life. The teams. I was fascinated by some of the points Daman made. I hadn't appreciated that, but you're doing coast to coast. Like I think you said they were going over and back in a week. Like that's a long haul. I've seen them in Boston unloading. And the other point he made that I thought was really, really good, because Daman said, you know, his recommendation to everyone would be to get the data, to have shows like DATIQ Live and Sales Chatter, and have people like ourselves go out and tell us what's happening in the marketplace. That's phenomenal. So it was just it was encouraging. I think there's a reason he sponsors this show. And because we talk about doing things the right way, which is what got Daman into the business, was doing things the right way.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because I actually spoke with somebody who's actually an agent for his company yesterday, and he had nothing but great things to say about Daman's leadership and things like that. And this is not a dedication show or a tribute to Daman, by the way. We'll get into the data and things like that, but you just it starts from the top down.
Great guy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's awesome to kind of see, and you know, it did give me an appreciation for what you guys can do, because I know you were filling in yesterday for Ken as well. So to kind of see you both go back and forth. One thing I wanted to touch on that you talked about yesterday, that spot rates, I believe they were going down like 6% across all modes before we're kind of entering. So can you touch on that a little bit, Dean?
Yeah, spot rates are, there's been a lot of conjecture in recent weeks, and I made the comment that it felt like spot rates were bottoming out. They did drop last week. I don't take too much out of last week's 6 cents per mile drop across the board. They were down about 7 cents a mile in dry van. So if we stick to dry van, they're at about $1.85 a mile. It's about 87 cents a mile lower than this time last year. Still 26 cents a mile higher than 2020, right? So that's an important data point, because if you remember, we lost a lot of capacity in 2019. Rates were dropping, and then we were still losing capacity right up until the pandemic hit in March of 2020. So our rates are still about 26 cents a mile higher than where they were in 2020, higher than 2019. But this is the quiet season, the slack season, and rates dropping last week on a short shipping week, albeit not a full-blown one, with a lot of capacity coming back into the market. I wasn't surprised to see spot rates drop. But all of our models, all of our 35-day forecast models for spot have rates bottoming out in the next 3 weeks, and that's the same across dry van, reefer, and flatbed to varying degrees. But where they're bottoming out is still relatively high compared to historical levels. So, but we are heading into a period. There's still probably, I think, maybe 5 to 10 cents a mile they could still go down depending on diesel prices and some demand indicators. But we're still not out of the woods yet in terms of this seasonal lull that happens around Lunar New Year and winter, because there's lots of other seasonal factors here from a weather perspective that drive that. And then we start to see things pick up late February, early March, which leads us into spring and all of those shipping volumes that happen there. So that's where the market is kind of at. We always said, and I think this is going back 6 months, we predicted that the market would bottom out in Q1, and it's holding true. That's the market cycle. When you look at when you look at the FMCSA data for entrants and exits, and I'll just give you the exact numbers here. We're running, I haven't got my dashboard loaded up here, but if you look at the net entrants, new entrants and reactivations minus the exits, or what they call, what's that word they use? Anyway, when you look at the spread between who's coming in and going out, getting a DOT authorization, which, for vehicles over 10,000 pounds with a DOT number, we're still losing capacity. We've been losing capacity since last October. So we've been gaining capacity from 2014 all the way through till October last year. Obviously, we gained a lot more capacity during the pandemic. Yeah. Prior to the pandemic, we'd always add about 1,000 net new DOT numbers every month. It was really consistent going back to 14. Jumped to as high as 4,000 a month during the pandemic, net new adds. And I think a lot of that capacity is smaller box trucks and parcel trucks, liftgate trucks, final mile trucks. Can't prove that, because everyone's got to remember that the DOT numbers that come out include every truck over 10,000 pounds. It's not just truckload carriers, but it's a good proxy because we see a very strong correlation in our own network in terms of net adds and subtractions. But the important point is that we lost capacity. We started to go negative in October last year. October, November were really bad, and it's flatlined since then. We're still negative. We're still not adding capacity. We're still losing capacity, but we're losing it at a slower rate. So we've got to let a bit of time pass, another week or so of data, to see if that in fact is the bottom, as in we've lost, capacity is starting to come back in terms of net adds or subtractions. But that will also coincide with when capacity starts to tighten again. That's when spot rates will start to pick up again, and then contract rates will eventually follow that. So that's where we're at right now. We're in this quiet period ahead of spring, ahead of produce season, ahead of shipping season coming out of, across the Trans-Pacific and Southern Asia. So there's lots of, demand indicators that say this is typically the quiet season, and that's pretty much how the market's playing out. But the two data points that we've always got to remember, even though rates have dropped to $1.87 a mile, my operating costs to run a long haul truck are about $1.96. My operating costs went up 2 cents a mile this week because diesel went up 6 cents a gallon. So even though we're running about 25 cents a mile higher than where we'd normally be for week 3 of the shipping year from a spot rate perspective, everyone's operating costs are up by about the same amount. So that's sort of where we sit here in week 3 of the year. Not horrible. Like, it's not some people take the glasses half empty when they look at spot rates down, 87 cents a mile year over year. We're still coming off some pretty high comps in 2021. So that we'll still see some of these, high numbers until we get further into the year. But we're coming off a very abnormal, probably 18-month period that I tend to exclude now that we're returning to a little bit more normality.
It's very interesting that you said that. But yesterday, I mean, I get opportunities for quotes like every single day. And I found this diamond in the rough, which I found very odd, and I should have wrote it down. But the lane was coming out of Missouri going Valparaiso, Illinois, I think it was.
Yeah.
The spot rate was $1,000 more than the contractual rate on that. And I was like, I had to look at that again, and I should have wrote it down. But I was like, that is like the biggest oddity that I ever saw, in a very long time. I mean, it was $1,000 more, at least $1,000 more. And that line, there was no bounce in it, Dean. It was like just a little bounce right across the board. And I was like, very interesting. It's for dry man too.
How do you spell Valparaiso?
Valparaiso, I think.
Ben from St. Louis?
Use it in a sentence. Spell it.
No, I'm not sorry. Yeah, it was
That's
something
interesting.
like that. I'm pretty sure it was, but it was
interesting. Did you
it
say
was
St. Louis
really
in Missouri?
weird. Yeah, I believe it was in Missouri. I don't know. I had like so many, and I was like, it was one of those up there, but it was a very odd one, and I should have wrote it down for today's show. So my bad.
Well, it's 314 miles, Jeff. So it's probably not quite enough to do a round trip in a day when you're going into that area. If you think about it, so they're probably pricing it at a bit longer than a day. Contract rates today are at 306, including fuel. But they've been trending down all year. They were $4 a mile last year. Spot is 274. So there's only like 20 cents a mile in it. So the rates are closing. The gap is narrowing. The spread is narrowing on contract and spot. So that would tell you that if spot was so much higher yesterday, a lot of the contract carriers were rejecting that lane.
Yeah.
And I think I would struggle to run a 312 mile lane. I would reject those loads. That's just not enough miles. Only if I was going into a low population density area where I could turn and burn.
Something out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of carriers reject that Lakeland to Orlando lane, because at 423 miles, you're toast once you hit, those highways around there. You're going to burn a day. 420 miles is not enough. So a lot of those carriers looking for 600 are probably going to be more. Strong Silo can do 340. Yeah. A few logbooks. Yeah. That's a pretty easy day where I'm from, but not with traffic, right? So traffic and delays at shippers and around southern Indiana can be problematic.
Yeah, and another interesting thing, we spoke about this last week about the AB5 and Governor Newsom's order about power units 2010 or older and no longer, right? I talked to a dray carrier out in Oakland yesterday because I've got some loads coming in there. He said that he got a letter that said it was 2009.
Engines. I think it's the engines. Yeah.
And I was like, any updates on that? Like, I think you said it was 10% of the total or something like that.
I haven't tracked it in the last week. I haven't.
It was a 10% decrease in capacity because of the age of the power units out there. I mean, that's a huge number. I mean, I don't know if whatever. The
car people put the number at about 70,000 was one number I heard. I wrote to the car people to ask about that. Because this originally was a drayage program where it was mostly the drayage operators were in on January 1. That was extended to everybody. So that's why it kind of was flying under the radar for so long, even though that regulation was put in place. I think 2008, I could be wrong, but it was a long time ago when they brought this phase change in. Yeah, the reason why you're not hearing a lot about it, Jeff, is I think it's such a soft market from a capacity perspective. The truckload capacity market is so loose in and around Los Angeles because import volumes have cratered. They just had two of the biggest drops in month over month. I think November, Los Angeles, Long Beach down 16%, down about 15% in December. So they're month over month changes. John McCown said they were two of the biggest month over month drops in history. So, volumes have really tanked on the West Coast. And of course, and you would say, well, that's not normal because it should be peak season.
Right.
But that means that the quiet time this year, which is the slack season for imports around Lunar New Year, means it's even quieter. So I think you've got a lot of people looking for work, and that's maybe why it hasn't created the headlines that you would normally see maybe 18 months ago. Imagine if this was 18 months ago and we had 100 vessels offshore and we had docks were full and people are renting car parks to put containers.
You thought we were in trouble last year at that time. Just imagine if that was enforced.
Right.
My God.
Yeah, so I just don't know. I mean, I feel for folks that are involved in that. I don't. To me, as a a diesel engine truck owner, I don't fully understand it because my 03 engine still passes all the emission tests. Massachusetts emission tests aren't as stringent as California, but they're still pretty stringent, right? So they take it very seriously. So I just don't. I guess they got to draw the line in the sand somewhere because older trucks tend to, as they age, they get closer. Their length of haul decreases. So I get that ports have always traditionally had very old trucks with low mileage, but they tend to have the worst engines. So we're still got a ways to go before we get to the cleaner engines, being there. And of course, I think it's 2030 where they want everything that's working on the docks in California to be electric?
30. I think it's 35.
35. Okay, yeah. So
I think it's 35. But something we've chatted about this. I mean, for God's sakes, the infrastructure in California can't even support air conditioners. I mean, think about that. I mean, they're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, they got to really start rethinking this because that road they're on, that path, it's not going to be a well-traveled path. I'll tell you right now because they're going to run into so many red flags. They're not going to be able to do it.
Did you see there was an Instagram social media post out this week, and I won't tell you the brand of the truck, but they're on the side of the highway, and the guy says, if you want to see the latest ABC battery-powered vehicle, come pull up on the I-5 here and have a look at it because it was out of power.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one. It was so funny. There was a headline of a heavy wrecker that was pulling an electric EV vehicle, and they said the diesels did it again, because no power.
Well, this is the bleeding edge of technology, right? The early adopters, we've got to go through these teething problems. Infrastructure is a huge part of this, though. You're absolutely right.
Oh, yeah.
I think I applaud the folks at Tesla for doing what they're doing, but that's a very controlled, tight loop truckload operation, dedicated. You've got minimal opportunities for things to go south on you on a tight loop like that. But when you go to one-way trucking, that's a very different business because trucks aren't where loads are. You've always got a lot of distances to travel to get to loads. Infrastructures can't be random. It's got to be strategically placed on networks where trucks run. And this is a massive country where you've got so many trucks running. Flying in last night from Atlanta, and it was about 11 p.m. we're flying in. And I always look out the window and I could see I-10 all the way to El Paso from Tucson out my window because it's a beautiful clear night. Right. And how did I know it was the I-10 from 35,000 feet? Yeah. Because it was a line of trucks bumper to bumper with lights. It was nuts. You don't appreciate it how much freight moves in this country till you go out and sit on the I-10 or the 40 and just watch the trucks go past. I mean, that's my second occupation is truck watching.
People go bird watching, people go plane watching. You'll catch Dean just looking at trucks. So.
I'm out there practicing my wave.
For your Miss America, I'll finally get my shot.
No, it's the one-fingered wave. No, there's an art. You've got to. There's a whole video I've done on the art of waving because it's the no-look wave as you go past on the other side of the freeway. There's a lot of different waves, but I do it in jest because a lot of drivers don't wave in America. I'm appalled that drivers don't wave, even on single lane blacktop where you're looking at the guy in the eyes. They still don't wave. Come on, dude.
Okay, here's the biggest question, Dean. Here's the biggest question. I did it as a kid too. How many kids in the backseat of mom and dad's car go like this? Come on, how many?
All the time,
Do you get them?
all the time in traffic. If
All
you're
right,
looking,
good.
all the
right.
time. Yeah. Now,
Good.
I have asked some kids, do you want the air horn or the train horn? Which one do you want? So I've got to, sometimes I let the air horn off, and mum and dad are absolutely horrified in the front.
Oh yeah, they just pull off the side of the road.
What was that?
Yeah, he's dangerous driving over here. You know, like,
I got 5 big cast iron train horns sitting under the chassis just for those ignorant car drivers.
Yeah, there you go. You know something? Staying with the EVs, just for a little bit more. You know, when you look at inside deliveries, white glove deliveries, liftgate, all of that. I mean, when you think about that, how are they going to resolve that issue as well? Because think about, and I don't know the percentage, maybe you do, how many of the loads that are moved out there have the inside delivery, the white glove, the liftgate? I mean, they really, that's what I'm saying. They're putting the cart before the horse. They have to figure that out, because there's a majority of last mile, and they're pushing that last mile on those EVs, right? So how are they going to physically take that box out of the back of that truck and put it on the porch or into a dock? You know, I don't know, even after hours, because I know when I was at Ford Motor Company, my drivers had keys to these little warehouses that had these satellite-driven locks in it, so it would be on-time delivery performance. We did that to all of our dealers. And so when they came in there, they had a stamp. They put their code in, it sent the satellite signal, so we get real data as to when they were in there and when they left and locked the building, which was great, right? So what do you do in those situations? You know, I mean, there's a lot of things they got to start thinking about when they're developing this. And I think
it's like the, you know, when I used to work for Spirion Trailer Telematics in Irvine, California, and out front there was like 12 EV charging stations outside a corporate office. Right. So if you take that analogy, that would have to be applied to every single loading dock, you know, because every time you're on loading dock, perfect time to be recharging. I think the Tesla truck said it was a 70% recharge in 30 minutes. So if you're having a 30-minute break, or you're on a loading dock unload, that's the perfect place to have all your EV technology. But just imagine the cost to put in power charging infrastructure on every loading dock. So I think we're a long way from having that. I think
even for the consumers too, right? Because like I've said this many times on the show, like we're hitting 2 years since we've moved into this home here, and the standard feature, I actually have the rough-in in the garage for an EV charger. You know, that was standard feature, you know, and if they were only going to charge, if we had an electric vehicle, it would only been $200 for a charger, right? So I feel like we're going to see that with homes more, and the kind of the consumer base. And then because when I look at it, we've got like three actually charging stations within probably a 5-kilometer radius of us, and those popped up within, I would say, maybe in the last like 3 years. I would say there was one Tesla one, and then they kind of go from there. So I think, I don't know, for me, I can only attest to what I've seen. I went to Wisconsin like last year, and I didn't see any Teslas, I didn't see any EVs, but if you come to Toronto, they're all over the place. You know, it's a common occurrence. Like the neighbors, both of us, they all have Tezies, so it's a very common occurrence.
My neighbour's got a steep driveway, and he came roaring home in the snow yesterday in his Tesla. And I said to my son, why wouldn't he take his Jeeps? He said, well, the Tesla's all-wheel drive, so it should be able to handle the snow. I didn't know they were all-wheel drive, but maybe that's an option. But anyway, he comes whipping up the driveway way too fast, slides off, gets stuck. And I yelled out, do you want to push? And he kind of harumphed and grumbled and got out and abandoned his Tesla in the driveway. Oh, that'll come back at the barbecue in the spring. I'll remind him of that.
Make sure you take your meringue, so you know to get from there.
Soften things a bit. Yeah,
soften things.
Hey,
Jeff, I know you.
Sorry, go on.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things we talked about in the show yesterday, our headlines, was the trailer orders, which, you know, I was going to lead off from what Jeff was talking about with lift gates. Because it occurred to me that lift gates are obviously a big problem for trailers that sit around too long because the batteries go dead. It's got to be recharging. Trailer telematics, some have got solar power, so, you know, they can sit there and trickle charge during the day when they're sitting. But the data point was that ACT Research reported the second highest monthly order. I think it was 55,000 trailers ordered in December, second highest number in history. History goes back to 1996, since they've been capturing new trailer orders. Jennifer McNeely from Act Research said they're seeing very strong demand through the end of 2023 for trailers, which is, it's an interesting data point when you think about what's the demand outlook for trailers, because that's the trailing side. It's the, it's the drop and hook piece. But one of the things that I was shocked by when I was at Spirion, we studied trailer telematic data to look at utilization levels of some very large shippers. One shipper had 5,000 trailers, and so there were 3 or 4 large truckload carriers looking after the different distribution centers for this particular customer. So 5,000 trailers, a lot of money, big capex every year. But when I looked at the telematics data, because you would think, because they were looking to buy another 500 or 600 trailers in this particular year, which again was a normal. And I thought, well, why would you be, why? Like, do you not have enough? And I said, so let's look at the utilization levels of your trailers. So we had the GPS lat long of all the trailers, which geofenced every distribution center they went in and out of, and every customer, to track what I call the trailer turns, which is how many times a week does the trailer break the geofence of the shipper. So the average was 0.98 turns per week on the fleet of 5,000 trailers, 1 load per week. Now, the caveat there is that was a lot of multi-stop, out and back dedicated freight. So I wasn't, they said if we could get it to 1.2, we'd save about $5 million a year. So they weren't talking about, running the wheels off the trailers, but the problem they had wasn't that they couldn't get the trailer turns up. It was a bell curve distribution. So not all trailers do equal amount of miles. And this is the problem with time-based maintenance, because some trailers work really hard, others do absolutely nothing. So when you plot the number of trailer turns per month, you see a bell curve distribution. There were like, if I had 50 trailers in a drop yard, 10 would do 80% of the loads, and they were the shiniest, newest trailers. But they're also the trailers that were always dropped at the front of the pile. So the trailers at the back of the pile in the 3rd or 4th row never got touched. Some of them were really good new trailers. So there's the physical aspect of, it's like supermarkets rotating their shelves. You rotate the stock on the shelves. You bring your older stock to the front. They have a physical limitation in getting their older trailers, the ones that aren't utilized, or newer trailers, into the rotation. And so sometimes it's an arbitrary system. Drivers just go and pick whatever trailer they want, or the spotter just picks a trailer that's easiest, quickest. So the thing that we worked on with this particular customer is not buying more trailers. It was using the ones they had. And part of me, when I look at record numbers of trailer orders, I wonder if that still persists across trailer pools, where you've got some trailers doing all the work.
Right. And something, it's the way I look at it, because I dealt with it, it's a lack of a YMS, a yard management system, that they're not putting those trailer numbers in there and getting them into a cycle. And when they have the yard horse that's out there doing the rotations, they should be doing it. They should get equal miles and get those trailers out there, because now there's cost associated with it as well. The more you use a trailer more than others, more maintenance fee, more maintenance cost. So you've got to get that into a cycle. So that tells me that, one, I don't think they have a YMS out there, because if they did, and they were able to log those trailer numbers, it's the first in, last out, not first in, first out, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to get that rotation in, and somehow their yard's not set up into that rotation of what comes in, what just came in, a logbook, a reference or whatever. And I think that's where they're failing, definitely failing. I can tell you that,
Jeff, it's not just the extra maintenance on the trailers that are used more, it's the degradation of the trailers that are sitting doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because in states where you need probable cause to be pulled over, trailing equipment is an easy mark for a state trooper. So if you've got trailers, that's why during, Brake Safety Week or International Road Check Week, I say to people, don't worry about the truck. You've got to worry about the trailers, because trailers in trailer pools that sit around are just an easy mark, because they got lights broken, tires, worn, flat, you got mud flaps hanging off. There's all sorts of easy things.
The airlines as well, the brake canisters under the back and stuff like that. I mean, they're not being used. Some of them lock up as well. So it's they got, that's the problem right there. There's a hidden bank for anybody out there, that wants to save some money. you need a YMS. I'm telling you right now, and get that cycle going because it will save you a ton of money.
Yeah. You know, Daman makes a good point there that you also need the manpower to keep those trailers inspected. My days of owning truck fleets were before telematics, where you'd go out and do your yard check every morning. You'd walk around and see what's in the yard, and you'd tack down trailer numbers, and you'd look at them, and you write it on your load sheet for the day.
Right. Well, that's all tracking, right? I mean, that's all.
It should be easy to
right. Part of it. I mean, you put in trailer 1, 2, 3, 4, and you put the inspection date that's on it, and then you should be able to build that Excel file to send up red flags. So it's date specific. That's saying, hey, guess what? When that pops up, it's an expiration date. You got 3 days to get that re-inspected. This way, there's no downtime with that trailer. You can't use it. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to improve that operation for sure. And
at some fleets, it's like when they park their trailers, they have the doors open. Some have the doors closed. So, is the trailer unloaded or loaded? We had to at Spirion, we had to build tracking technology that had a camera sensor on the back door to see was it a pallet or dunnage or was there actual freight inside the trailer? Because sometimes the trailer had hit the dispatch board and it says it's empty, and of course you go over there and it's still half loaded. So Damon's right. It's a massive logistical exercise to manage trailer pools. So again, in the year of hot takes, I did say last year we'll probably end up with a lot of trailers sitting around doing nothing with no freight. Mm-hmm. And at some point, when we've got record numbers of trailers, and of course, you've got to balance that with it's the end of the financial year. So a lot of people do make acquisitions for tax purposes before the end of the calendar year. But order books did open later. We're seeing a lot of trailers come into the market. And of course, some of the big fleets, the big truckload carriers on the public side are talking a lot more about drop and hook as a way to keep the driver power unit, more mobile and making money. So I get the logistics of all of that. But I think Jeff's right. A yard management system is absolutely critical for those fleets.
Absolutely.
That's awesome to kind of talk about there, and it's something completely out of my element because I kind of do outside of the trails. But it's good to have these discussions because we're giving value to everybody who might be going into a situation where they're looking at drop-in hooks and doing different things. And Daman brings up a point here, like it's these additional costs that you kind of look at as well, like shunting, maintenance, repairs, etc. Like it's just labor. And gents, I know Jeff, you've been really talking. We've been talking about the West Coast a lot, and we're kind of seeing like the Lunar New Year, which actually happened a lot sooner than it normally does. It's usually February, and then we kind of see that a little bit of a change. Any kind of like thoughts from both of you, because I know both of you guys obviously do research and things like that, kind of like what the container market's going to kind of look like for those who don't do container shipments and kind of want to get into it for their customers, but just a little bit of insight of what you guys are kind of seeing as we're already in first quarter.
Okay.
The forecasting piece is hard, and I did read an article about this, so I'm struggling to recall what Ariash said about it. We are going to see it'll be April, I think they said, before we start to see those volumes come back to normal levels. They were talking about more traditional volumes. When you look at, if I can quickly pull up here, I think this will be a good way to frame this discussion. When I look at the total number of imports, they've dropped just back under 2 million for the first time since, I think it was 28 months ago, they broke through the 2 million barrier. And so they ended on the peers survey. I've just pulled up the import data, 2,064,000 TEUs on the import side. If you go back, the last time we broke through 2 million was April of 2020. And of course, since April of 2020, we were above 2 million. But if I go back and look at, so December 2019, Ryan, was 1.9 million TEU, and it was about that level way back through 18. The 2016 peak season, we only just broke through 2 million. So it wasn't really until 2017 that we started to consistently bump up over 2 million. The problem with the supply chain in recent months, recent 18 months period, was we all up 2 million for far too long. So the answer to the question was we are seeing the quiet season, the lull, but we won't, of course this is probably another hot take, but we won't see a reversion to those low levels that we would have typically seen back in 2019. Import volumes are going to stay higher, but the shift is going to be different. So that shift to Southeast Asia is more. There was a big headline this week on the Journal of Commerce about how Vietnam is picking up a lot more volume, deep sea.
Yeah.
The volume in December, here's the data point that they had, the amount of deep sea container capacity in Vietnam increased 20% year over year in December as customers move away from China to Southeast Asia for alternate or different or additional redundancy in their supply chains. And why that's important is when you start to go to Southeast Asia, it brings the Suez Canal into play for freight to the East Coast, as opposed to the West Coast and Panama Canal. So that's for people thinking about trucking and logistics and where assets need to be placed. That's why when we had Larry Gross on our show last week, he said that he thinks a lot more of the freight volume that's shifted to the East Coast will stick because people are moving more volume to the East Coast from Southeast Asia.
It's crazy. And as one of the countries, like I kind of personally pay attention to is Apple, right? And Apple kind of just re-released like their new their new chips, the M2 chips, and their new MacBooks, and basically their whole line. They usually kind of do this usually in the summer, springtime, but for them to kind of do that, especially going away from the M1 and kind of be built from there. Guys, you guys live in America, and I see the memes, and it doesn't affect us here in Canada, but I do want to ask you both, what's going on with eggs in the US right now? It feels like I see all the memes, I see everything, but is there something that's going, like everybody's saying that you got to take a second mortgage for it? We're not seeing it. Eggs has been the same price here in Canada, maybe because we are sourced there, but what's going on?
Avian flu was a story that was, we covered this in the Thanksgiving lead up where they'd had to cull, tens of millions of birds because of avian flu, the bird flu last year.
Like 20 million.
That affected too. So it's cost of labor, so it's cost of grain, right, to feed because all of your poultry locations are obviously close to food sources, grain being a big part of that. That's why you see so many through the Midwest and in the Carolinas. So, I mean, to be honest, I haven't noticed it yet where we are in New England. I mean, prices are high for everything, so maybe it just high prices of eggs gets washed away with all the other high prices we pay for food and groceries. On my wife's catering business, that's sort of my litmus test for how short things are. They haven't seen a shortage yet, but we are seeing. Remember, this is the quiet season for restaurants and catering businesses and food services. So the demand is not as high there because people are still spending a lot more on services as opposed to goods. But eggs are one of those staples that people would buy every day. But I haven't seen it, but it's the bird flu that's really affecting it.
Yeah, definitely the bird flu. And one of the memes that I saw was the headrest of a car, and they had like a lockbox in it where they put their eggs in, and they had the thing in it, because it was like such a high value item. It really is. It's just crazy, but I believe that it has something to do with the bird flu. I mean. I just thank God for the internet. I just typed in egg shortage. Arizona pops up where I am today. Egg prices in Arizona have jumped 50%, but the state is doing okay as far as hens laying anyway. So yeah, prices are up for sure across the country. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy that everybody thinks about, because it's always it's always been like a cheap protein source, right? Like everybody who's who's trying to eat healthy and things like that has always been different from there. So it's good because I see the memes all over the place. So I'm like, hey, what's going on? Because we went to the grocery, but another test, and I don't know if it's the big R word that's coming up, Dean, but are you both familiar with Instacart? It's basically you order groceries online, somebody comes and delivers it to your house. So somebody actually goes and privately shops you. So. For me, what I've kind of noticed too is that I just have the app as a purchaser and things like that. And every time I've kind of gone on the app, there's no drivers available, and that's just a testament. Like people are either ordering, they're not ordering in store, or they're just going in person. But it's just, you kind of look at those things and you're like, okay, well, people are looking at discretionary. I think Blue Monday was last Monday, where it's like the saddest day of the year. Everyone got their credit card bills from Christmas and things like that. But with that being said, I think discretionary discretionary spending is definitely on the down. I don't see we go to take. I can't remember the last time we went to an actual restaurant. We do kind of a takeout, we cook at home and things like that, but it's not a price thing. It's just that I don't know. It's like, do we want to go to a restaurant anymore? Like, is that something that
Right.
it really enthuses us?
Right.
And you know,
Right.
when we can make
Right.
the same thing at home. But when does that be an impact into like, the supply chain, if it does at all?
Go ahead, Dean.
I missed the question.
I was going to say it's funny and sad. We have a pizza parlor not so far away from here, and the owner actually delivered the pizza, and I was like, "Where's the drivers?" You know, and he's like, "I can't find drivers at all." You know, it's just like it's ironic. I mean, when we grew up, I mean, a lot of people used to go and deliver pizzas and stuff like that. Now it's like a hard commodity to find. You can't. Nobody wants to do that kind of stuff. I don't know why.
Right. That's
Funny enough, Jeff, I love this can of worms you're doing because I was on Indeed. I think Indeed is in the States. I'm not too sure, but Indeed is where you go and find jobs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
It's funny to me. People post jobs, like companies post jobs, and you'll honestly see like the lowest I've seen, like between 200 to 300 people have applied for like these entry jobs. So like I'm not
Mm.
seeing the correlation. You know, everyone's
Mm.
applying, everybody wants to work, but then you hear the other side of it. Maybe it's like the
Right.
owner wanting to keep costs lean because there's a bubble tea
Mm.
spot right across the street from us, and I've spoken with the owner. Every time I go in, it's always the owner, and he's like, "Yeah, it's just me and one other person because I just want to. If I want a franchise, he said, if I want to get a second or third franchise, I got to keep these costs down because
Right.
it just doesn't make sense for me to hire a high school kid who might only be here for like 3 to 6 months and then they leave and they kind of go through that as well. But it's crazy to
Mm.
see that because like I noticed that this week on Indeed, like I was like, hey, let's look at some side hustles, and then I was like, oh my god, like
Mm.
300 400 people are applying for these jobs, and I'm like, whoa, like how am I going to stand out?
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
really interesting, and you probably read it as well. I'm not going to name the company, but they fired thousands of people. And then you see Indeed and out there that they're hiring people.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
why don't you just keep the key
What happened?
individuals or some of them in their
Right.
roles instead of
Right.
releasing them and then put an ad out to hire people? I mean,
Makes no sense.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I think the one
You
thing
know,
with
every-
that too. Sorry, go ahead, Indeed.
Well, it just says there's certain sectors. I mean, you know, we're hiring. DAT Freight and Analytics is hiring people. You know, so I think there's certain industries that are growing, certain are shrinking. It looks like a lot of some of the service companies that overgeared in terms of staffing numbers are paring back now. You know, trucking industry still finds it hard to find drivers. You know, good drivers that want to make
Always
it a
been a
career.
problem.
Always been a problem. It's such a hard job. You know, I was at a conference and there was a guest in front of me and she was berating the staff and I said to the staff, I said, you must hate it when people are rude like that for no reason. You know, it was such a minor thing. She said that's why it's hard to find staff in the service industry because people are generally so rude. And of course, you see it all on social media, right? At airlines, and I think this is sort of
They
that
call them Karens.
hangover. Yeah, it's the hangover effect from the pandemic, where people sort of went to their respective corners, and I don't know everybody's come out of their corners yet and started to be nice to people. You see a little bit of it, you know.
It'd be nice if they did that.
Yeah, I see it on you know, when you travel tends to bring out the worst in people. That's not a news story, but during the pandemic, it was, you know, you were isolated, you know, pretty much you never really talked to anybody. But I still see a little bit of that with the service industry. But this young lady said this is why it's hard to find people in the industry because people are so vile to us. I thought, well, that's one reason you're going to find it hard to work in an industry like that.
Well, I always say this too, like, and Jeff, you could attest to this too. When the pandemic happened, a lot of people they were forced out of work, like in the service industry, right? They had to stay at home, and a lot of people they said, "Hey, I'm going to do a side hustle. I'm going to start a cake business. I'm going to start a catering business. I'm going to be my own boss." And you know, and that's what we're seeing. Like, you know, as Jeff was kind of saying, people like the story that Jeff just told of a company laying off thousands of people, it's not an isolated incident. It's almost every tech company out there that's doing that, right? And you know, you kind of look to if you go on TikTok, I'm not sure if you guys are big on TikTok, but like my TikTok feed is like side hustles. It's how to have 3 work from home jobs at the same time. It's like there's all these different things to kind of not necessarily scan the system, but to kind of like build it up better. And I think when it comes to trucking, it's our industry, as Jeff kind of said, there's always been a shortage, right? And as you guys were talking, I was reading an article because when do you guys think that trucking, if it hasn't already, might become mainstream, like might become viral, might become the next cool thing to do? Do you guys ever see that?
you know what? I'll answer this really quickly. And it's always been a question for decades. You ask a driver, would your son or daughter like to be a truck driver? You already know the answer. That's the problem. Nobody wants to fill that seat. The old drivers are retiring. They're not coming in. They don't want the blue collar jobs. They want the white collar jobs. It's always been a problem. It's always going to exist. I don't think that it's going to turn unless the pay goes up astronomically. And then guess what's going to happen? The shipper's going to pay for it, and us being not just in logistics, but as a consumer, are also going to pay it on the backside as well. The question is, do we want to pay more, to support the logistics industry and these drivers who basically give us everything that are on our table? I mean, we can't live without them. It's just a shame that, people out there don't realize that and treat drivers the way they do. I just shake my head every single day when I see it and hear it. It's just crazy. I don't get it.
Family businesses, there's still still sort of succession planning in family businesses, short haul, non-freight businesses where people are home, maybe local regional work. I still see when I go to truck shows, right? You see all those folks that are doing extremely well, family businesses, short haul, regional, dump trailer, steel trailer, flatbed. There's a lot of people that want to go through the straight truck to the lightweight Arctic day cab to the big trucks. There's still a bunch of people out there that want to be part of that, the cool factor of driving a big long hooded Peterbilt with a twin sticks and 8-inch pipes and big Caterpillar engines. There's a lot of people that want to do that, right? But then when you get out of that, that's the smallest part of the industry, right? When you're thinking about freight, because a lot of the drivers that don't come from families, that haven't seen this, that are looking at trucking as something to do in between other jobs, right? They have to go to that longer haul where you're exposed to frustration, ridicule, harassment, waiting time on loading docks. There's very few jobs in the world where you can just be harassed by the authorities on the side of the road just for doing your job. So, there's so much that goes into the trucking job that makes it really, really hard to make people make a career out of it. For a lot of people, it's a job because it grinds you down unless you come into it loving the industry and the smell of diesel and cow manure, right?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, and this is going back a few decades. I think the only uptick, and maybe Dean will agree with me, the only uptick that I saw was when J.B. Hunt, and I'll hand it to J.B. Hunt, changed the long haul to regional and super regional, more time at home. A lot of drivers jumped on that. We need something like that, what J.B. Hunt did many years ago today in order to make that happen. There has to be something unique that's going to want to get those drivers, male and female, into those seats and go, this is worth it. This is what I want to do. And until that time, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, it's cool that you said that because, I know, Jeff, you definitely don't have TikTok, but being on TikTok a lot, there's actually drivers out there that I personally follow myself that they got two incomes. They got incomes from being a truck driver, and they got an income from actually making videos and making content based off being a truck driver. And it was actually, I think one of them I looked at, their viral content that they got paid from YouTube and TikTok was more money than their actual driver salary. So they're getting paid twice, and they're kind of double dipping. And it's kind of cool to see because, we got guys like Luis, who's on Jeff's show on Thursdays, that he gets a post, and Dan, I think Dan, the guy who does like the berries and refrigerated on LinkedIn, we get to see the day in the life of them, of what they're doing, of what they're doing. They're playing their little PS5 or, they're driving from place to place, and they get to, and it's that interaction that we should shed a light on more because when you look at social media, like what you're doing with as well with Grumpy Pete, and is you're shedding a lens that I would never see in my life. So once you kind of open that up, that's where I feel like, that's why I asked the question, when do you think it'll be like the cool thing or the popular thing or the viral thing? I think as long as we keep just putting those lenses on it, that's what's going to come. And people are for Jeff's question, ask your kids, ask somebody's kids, hey, would they ever want to be a truck driver? I say give it another 5 years and people want to say yes. I think
and
so.
You know something with that, Brian, just real quick.
Yep.
I think what that shows is passion, this non-passion whatsoever. When you see a driver that has a clean rig that you can see that they love that job, compared to a driver that their cab is
Rust.
completely whatever, they don't even wash their truck. It's like, why the hell are you in this business? I mean, you know, those are the big differentiators right there. Dan, Louise, you can see it, and those kind of pictures are what drives people want to be a truck driver. They're like, wow, this looks like a home that I could live in, you know, because they take care of their equipment and they love what they do. That's the big differentiator right there.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I know we're coming up on time. Dean, you are in Phoenix, I believe. You are Arizona.
Phoenix. I'll be out at the famous Triple T truck stop this morning, talking to some truck drivers on the I-10. Famous, one of the oldest, biggest privately owned truck stops in the country. Still, it's talking with social media, Ryan. A lot of guys that run east-west, if they don't do it regularly, this is one of those places you always pull up at under the Triple T sign and take a picture. It's one of those truck stops that's famous for that. So I'll be there and up at OTR Solutions in Phoenix today, and back for the Great West Casualty Company Conference here in Tucson on Friday, talking about how you use data to manage risk in trucking, as well as a freight market update.
Very nice. Awesome. I can't wait to see your pictures there, Dean.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you need to take the selfie and send it to us or post on LinkedIn, or then we got to see this famous truck stop and things like that. And you know, Jeff, I was kind of leave you here. Any final thoughts quickly about our day today?
No, I think it was very informative. Thank you so much, Dean, for joining us and spending an extra half an hour with us. I know your time is limited, so thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you next week, and have a great rest of your week.
We should give a shout out to Nerf. He's on fire today in the comments.
Yeah, he's actually on tomorrow. He's with us tomorrow. So yeah, he's gonna be on our show. So definitely tune in tomorrow. Nerf will be joining us. We'll actually be talking about booking your first load. Yeah, he's the guy.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, see, so we're kind of go from there. So want to thank everybody for coming out today. We'll see everybody again at the 12 and 3 p.m. Eastern time as we hit our replays on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Like we said, it's always amazing to have Dean with us, giving us that knowledge and taking nuggets back to your customers, right? And being a better solution provider. And with that being said, as we segue, we've got Nerf joining us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be live on all social channels, and we're going to be talking and having a lot of fun. So with that, guys, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Be safe. If you've got so many snow coming out to you, I know in Toronto here, we got about 10 to 12 inches coming our way. So be safe to everybody, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Have a great day.
See ya.